The Mafia boss burned his mansion to ashes after discovering she sold his secrets to survive. The vibration of the phone in her back pocket felt like a physical burn against Eva Carter's skin. She ignored it, just as she had ignored the previous 3 calls that afternoon, and focused on the sticky, mahogany surface of the bar top. The bass of the music at Perseus thumped rhythmically against her ribcage, a relentless heartbeat that matched the pounding in her own temples. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and her shift was far from over. By day, Eva was a paralegal at a mid-tier law firm, drowning in paperwork and the abrasive demands of partners who did not know her name. By night, she was here, pouring top-shelf vodka for men who wore suits that cost more than her car. Between the 2 jobs, she slept perhaps 4 hours a night. The exhaustion sat deep in her bones, a heavy, cold weight that coffee could no longer touch. She wiped down a spill near the elbow of a patron who had had too much to drink. The phone buzzed again. This time, she knew without looking that it was the billing department for the Green Hallow nursing facility. Her mother's care was not cheap, and the grace period for the last missed payment had expired yesterday. Eva kept her face impassive. She had perfected the mask years ago. "Hey, sweetheart." The voice was slurred, accompanied by the heavy scent of scotch. A man in a disheveled gray suit was leaning over the bar, waving an empty glass. He was loud, stumbling, and beginning to draw the wrong kind of attention. "I need another. Make it a double." Eva checked the time on the register. "Sir, I think you've had enough for tonight. How about a water?" The man scowled, slamming his hand onto the counter. The sound was sharp, cutting through the low hum of conversation in the VIP lounge. "Do not tell me what I have had. I know the owner." Eva did not flinch. She had heard that line 1,000 times. She calmly placed a glass of water in front of him, her movements fluid and practiced. Beside the water, she slid the bill she had already printed, tucking it neatly under a coaster. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply projected a wall of polite, immovable silence, while the man sputtered. Eva turned her attention back to the open ledger on the counter. She was not just bartending. The manager, struggling with the new digital inventory system, had asked her to reconcile the nightly invoices in exchange for an extra $50 under the table. She was balancing the liquor cost percentages in her head while simultaneously managing a belligerent drunk. She did not see the man standing in the shadows of the upper mezzanine, watching her. Luca Moretti stood with his hands deep in the pockets of his tailored trousers. From his vantage point, the owner of Perseus could see everything: the flow of money, the security rotations, and the exhausted woman behind the bar who was diffusing a volatile situation with the grace of a diplomat. He watched as she whispered something to the drunk man, who blinked, looked at the bill, and then surprisingly settled down, drinking the water. She had tired eyes, Luca noted, dark circles she tried to hide with concealer, but her spine was steel. "Bring her up," Luca said to the security guard beside him. 10 minutes later, Eva was standing in the center of an office that felt more like a fortress than a workspace. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Harborview's skyline, a glittering grid of amber and white lights against the darkness of the Atlantic. The room smelled of leather and sandalwood. Eva clasped her hands in front of her to hide the tremor in her fingers. Everyone in Harborview knew who Luca Moretti was. You did not get summoned to his office for a social call. She ran through a mental list of mistakes she might have made. Had she shortchanged a register? Had she broken a bottle? "Sit," Luca said. He was sitting behind a massive desk made of reclaimed dark wood. He did not look like the monsters the local papers hinted at. He looked sophisticated, dangerously calm, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and unreadable. Eva sat on the edge of the leather chair. "Mr. Moretti, if this is about the customer downstairs, I handled it according to protocol." Luca waved a hand, dismissing the thought. "I saw. That is why you are here." He picked up a file on his desk. It was not a personnel file. It was the inventory sheet she had been working on downstairs. My floor manager tells me you found a discrepancy in the supply order within 5 minutes of looking at it, a discrepancy he has been missing for 3 months. Eva swallowed. It was an arithmetic error in the vendor column. They were double charging for the crate deposits. Luca leaned back, studying her. The intensity of his gaze made the air in the room feel thin. Most people fold under pressure. Miss Carter, I watched you downstairs. You were balancing complex invoices in your head while a man twice your size was screaming at you. You did not blink. I need the money, Eva said simply. Focus is a requirement, not a choice. Luca's expression softened. Just a fraction. It was a micro-expression, there and gone. But it caught Eva off guard. He did not look at her with the predatory hunger of the men at the bar. He looked at her with curiosity. I need someone with that kind of focus, Luca said. My official bookkeeper is retiring. I need someone to handle the internal accounts for the club, and perhaps some other ventures. It is detailed work, private work. Eva felt a cold prickle of warning at the base of her neck. Other ventures. She knew the rumors. The Moretti Syndicate was not just a story people told to scare children. It was the unseen infrastructure of the city. I already have 2 jobs, Mr. Moretti. I will pay you triple what you make at the law firm, Luca said, his voice smooth, devoid of any threat. Cash, weekly. Eva stopped breathing for a second. Triple? If she made that kind of money, she could pay off the nursing home in 2 months. She could get the collectors off her back about her brother's surgery bills. She could sleep. God, she could actually sleep. I am a paralegal, Eva said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. I know where the lines are. I cannot be involved in anything illegal. Luca tilted his head. I am hiring you to balance numbers. Eva, math is not a crime. I need clean books. I need organization. I need someone who notices when a vendor is double charging for crates. He stood up and walked around the desk. He was taller than he looked from a distance, broad-shouldered and imposing. He stopped a few feet from her, leaning against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. No drugs, Eva said, her voice sounding small in the large room. No violence. I just do the math. Luca looked down at her. His eyes were dark, like the water in the harbor at night. Just the math. You have my word. Eva looked at his hand, then up at his face. She was making a deal with the devil. She knew that, but the devil was offering to save her mother from eviction. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Luca repeated. The following weeks fell into a strange rhythmic blur. Eva quit the bartending shifts, though she kept the law firm job for appearances. 3 nights a week, she went to the club, but instead of wearing the uncomfortable uniform and standing behind the bar, she sat in the quiet luxury of Luca's office. She organized ledgers that were a chaotic mess of shell companies and legitimate investments. She saw things, large transfers of cash, payments to consultants with no last names, but she kept her head down. She was true to her word. She did the math. Luca began to test her. At first, he would leave her alone in the office, but soon, he started asking her to stay while he took meetings. Sit in the corner, he told her one Tuesday. Just listen, take notes if you hear a number. Eva sat in the leather armchair, a laptop balanced on her knees, while 2 union representatives argued with Luca about dock fees. She watched him work. It was fascinating and terrifying. When the men yelled, posturing and threatening strikes, Luca did not raise his voice. He grew quieter. He sat perfectly still, his silence forcing them to fill the air with nervous chatter until they revealed more than they intended. But Eva found herself flinching when one of the men slammed a fist onto the table. It was an involuntary reaction, a remnant of a childhood she tried hard to forget. Luca's eyes snapped to her instantly. He did not look away from the union rep, but his hand lifted slightly, a subtle gesture that commanded silence. Lower your voice, Luca said. The tone was soft, but it carried the weight of a loaded weapon. We are in a place of business. The union rep looked confused, but he sat down, lowering his tone. After they left. Luca walked over to where Eva was sitting. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal carafe and set one down on the side table next to her. You have good ears, he said. You caught the discrepancy in their shipping estimates. Eva nodded. taking the water. Her hands were still trembling slightly from the shouting. "They are inflating the fuel surcharge. I know." Luca said. He paused, looking down at her. "You do not like loud noises." It was not a question. Eva straightened her spine. Defensive. "I am fine. It just startled me. You do not have to be tough in here." "Eva," Luca said quietly, "that is my job." He stayed close for a moment longer than necessary. Eva could smell the clean, sharp scent of his cologne. Cedar and rain. She felt a strange pull, a magnetic gravity that made her want to lean toward him. It terrified her more than the shouting had. It was a month into their arrangement when the storm hit. It was a torrential downpour that turned the streets of Harborview into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt. Eva had stayed late at the club to finish a quarterly audit. When she finally packed up her bag at 3 a.m, she checked her phone and saw the notification. Her rideshare had canceled. No drivers available. She stood under the awning of the club's back exit, shivering in the damp air, staring hopelessly at the sheet of rain falling in front of her. Her car had broken down 3 days ago, and the repair bill was sitting on her kitchen counter. Unpaid. "Need a lift?" She jumped. Luca was standing in the doorway behind her. He had shed his suit jacket, wearing only a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms. "My ride canceled," Eva admitted, hugging her cardigan tighter around herself. "I will just wait for another one." "You will be waiting an hour in this weather," Luca said. He stepped out, snapping open a large black umbrella. "Come on. My driver is out front. I will take you to your car." "I do not have my car," she said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "It is in the shop." Luca paused. "Then I will take you home." The walk to the waiting SUV was short, but it felt suspended in time. Luca held the umbrella high, shielding her completely while his own left shoulder took the brunt of the rain. They had to walk close to stay dry. Her arm brushed against his chest. He was warm, a solid, steady presence in the chaos of the storm. Under the orange glow of the streetlights, the rain looked like falling sparks. They stopped at the curb. Luca opened the back door for her, but he did not move away immediately. He stood there, holding the umbrella over her, his dark eyes searching her face. He looked at her mouth. Eva felt the air leave her lungs. The sound of the rain faded into a dull roar, eclipsed by the sudden, overwhelming awareness of his body near hers. He was going to kiss her. The thought was electric, terrifying, and undeniably wanted. Then Luca blinked, and the mask slammed back down. He stepped back, giving her space. "Get home safe." "Eva," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Eva slid into the car, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. 2 days later, the dynamic shifted again. Luca called her in the afternoon. "I need you to come to the house," he said. "The files I need you to look at are too sensitive to leave the property." Eva had seen pictures of the Moretti estate in the society pages, but the reality was different. It sat high on a hill overlooking the city, a sprawling mansion of gray stone and iron. She expected it to be cold, a museum of ill-gotten gains. When the housekeeper let her in, she was led not to a cold study, but to a kitchen. It was vast, yes, with marble floors and copper pots hanging from the ceiling, but it smelled of garlic and roasting rosemary. It smelled like a home. Luca was at the stove. He had abandoned the suit entirely, wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt. It was the most casual she had ever seen him, and it made him look younger, less like a kingpin and more like a man. "You are early," he said, turning around. He held a wooden spoon. "Have you eaten?" Eva opened her mouth to say yes, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud, treacherous growl. She had skipped lunch to save $12. Luca's eyes crinkled at the corners, a genuine smile. It transformed his face, making him devastatingly handsome. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to the island. "You cannot work on an empty stomach." He placed a bowl of pasta in front of her. It was simple, rustic, and the best thing she had ever tasted. He leaned against the counter opposite her, watching her eat with a soft, amused expression. He did not push her to talk. He just kept filling her water glass. "I did not know you cooked," Eva said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "My mother insisted. Luca said, she said, a man who cannot feed himself is useless." He talked about his mother with a reverence that surprised her. Eva found herself relaxing, the tension of the debt collectors and the nursing home fading into the background. Here, in this warm kitchen, she felt safe. After dinner, they moved to the dining room table. Luca brought out the heavy, leather-bound ledgers. These were not club invoices. These were the syndicate's true books, construction contracts, union payoffs, shipping routes. Eva hesitated when she saw the numbers. This was the deep end. This was the evidence that could put him in prison for life. Trust is a currency. "Eva," Luca said, sliding the book toward her, "I am spending a lot of it right now." She began to work. The house was silent around them, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock. They worked side by side for hours. At one point, Eva reached for a red pen at the exact moment Luca reached for it. Their hands collided. Eva froze. Her fingers were resting on top of his. His skin was warm, his hand large and rough-palmed. She looked up, and he was already looking at her. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a sudden, suffocating intimacy. Eva's breath hitched. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She could see the pulse beating in the hollow of his throat. Luca did not pull away. He turned his hand over, his fingers brushing against her palm, tracing the lifeline there. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering near his ear. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there with a hunger that made Eva's toes curl. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to cross the line he had drawn. But Luca closed his eyes for a second. Inhaling sharply through his nose, he pulled his hand back, the loss of contact leaving Eva's skin feeling cold. "We should keep things professional," he said. His voice was strained, tight. Eva nodded quickly, pulling her hand back into her lap. Of course. Professional. They finished the work in silence, but the tension remained, a live wire humming between them. Before she left, Luca walked her to the back terrace. The rain had cleared, leaving the night air crisp and clean. Below them, harbor view sprawled out like a map of diamonds. Eva leaned against the stone railing, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "It is beautiful from up here," she said softly. "It looks peaceful." "It is a lie," Luca said, standing beside her. "Down there, it is chaotic, violent. But from here, yes, it looks peaceful." He turned to face her. The moonlight washed out the color of his shirt, turning him into a silhouette against the city. He was standing too close again. Eva looked up at him. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair, blowing it across her face. Without thinking, Luca reached out. His fingers brushed her cheek, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He tucked the hair behind her ear, his hand lingering on the curve of her jaw. His thumb grazed her skin, a touch so light it felt like a ghost. Eva stopped breathing. She tilted her head up, her lips parting slightly. Luca leaned in. He was so close she could feel the warmth of his breath on her face. His eyes searched hers, looking for permission, looking for a reason to stop, for a heartbeat. The world suspended. There was no debt, no crime, no danger, just the man and the woman and the silence between them. Then, Luca exhaled, a ragged sound. "Gid." He dropped his hand. "Good night, Eva," he whispered. "Good night, Luca." She drove home with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. When she finally lay in her bed, staring at the cracked plaster of her ceiling, she was wide awake. She could still feel the phantom weight of his hand on her face. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she was in trouble. Not financial trouble, not legal trouble. She was falling for the king of Harborview, and that was a debt she did not know how to pay. The crisp autumn air bit at Eva's cheeks as she stepped out of the sliding glass doors of the Harborview Medical Center. She pulled her coat tighter, her mind a whirling spreadsheet of numbers that refused to balance. Her brother's latest treatment, a specialized physical therapy regimen for his spinal injury, had been approved, but the copay was astronomical. She was so focused on calculating the cost of groceries versus medication that she did not notice the man leaning against the brick wall until he stepped directly into her path. He was nondescript. Beige coat, receding hairline, the kind of face you forgot the moment you looked away, but his eyes were sharp, devoid of warmth. "Eva Carter?" he asked. Eva halted, gripping her purse strap. "I am in a hurry." "We know," the man said. He did not raise his voice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "We also know about the $12,000 you owe to County General, and the 3 months of back rent on your mother's facility." Eva felt the blood drain from her face. "Who are you?" "Collections," he said, though the words sounded like a joke coming from his mouth. "But my employer is interested in debt consolidation." He took a step closer. Eva smelled stale tobacco and mints. "My employer represents the Navarro Group," he said, dropping the name like a heavy stone. "We know you are spending a lot of time at Perseus. We know who signs your checks now." Eva took a step back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I just tend bar." The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Of course, just a bartender who spends hours in Luca Moretti's private office. He slid a business card into the pocket of her coat before she could stop him. "There are other ways to pay. Eva, think about it." He walked away, blending into the pedestrian traffic, leaving Eva standing on the sidewalk, shivering from a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. That night, the vice tightened. Eva was walking the last block to her apartment, the streetlights flickering overhead. The encounter at the clinic had left her rattled, paranoid. She kept checking over her shoulder. When a black sedan pulled up to the curb alongside her, she instinctively reached for the pepper spray on her keychain. "Miss Carter," a voice called out. "Federal agent." The passenger window rolled down. A man with a buzz cut and a jaw like a block of granite looked out. He held up a badge, the metal glinting under the street lamp. "Agent Klein." "Get in. We need to talk. I am close to home," Eva said, her voice trembling. "I can walk." Klein sighed, as if she were a petulant child. He held up a manila envelope. "I have photos of you. Eva. Photos of you carrying ledgers into Luca Moretti's mansion. Photos of you leaving at 3 a.m. Eva froze. "Get in," Klein repeated, "or I can come up to your apartment. I believe your landlord has a strict policy about police raids." Eva got in. The car smelled of new leather and stale coffee. Klein did not look at her. He simply tossed the envelope into her lap. She opened it. The photos were grainy but undeniable. Her and Luca on the balcony, her entering his office, her handling cash, accessory to racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Klein recited, ticking them off on his fingers. "That is 10 years. Minimum. Who takes care of your brother then? Who pays for your mother?" Eva stared at the photos. "I am a bookkeeper. I fix invoice errors. You work for the head of the Moretti Syndicate," Klein snapped. His voice hard. "You are inside. You see the money move. I do not know anything," she whispered. Klein turned to her. He had cold, pale eyes. "I do not care what you think you know. I want dates. I want shipment routes. I want to know where the money goes to get washed." He leaned in close, invading her space. "I know your mother is in the Green Hallow facility. Room 302, ground floor, easy access." Eva felt bile rise in her throat. "Is that a threat?" "It is a reality check," Klein said. "You are going to help us take down Moretti. If you do, maybe we can help with those debts of yours. If you do not, well, prisons are not known for their elder care facilities." He unlocked the doors. "I need something tonight. Eva, to prove you are serious, a shipment ID, a route, anything." Eva stumbled out of the car, her legs barely holding her up. She ran the rest of the way to her apartment, fumbling with her keys, locking the deadbolt, the chain, and the deadbolt again. She paced her small kitchen, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. They knew about her mother. They knew about the room number. She looked at her phone. She looked at the notepad on the counter. Luca had been kind to her. He had given her a job when no one else would. He treated her with respect. But Luca was powerful. Luca could take care of himself. Her brother could not. Her mother could not. With a shaking hand, Eva picked up a pen. She wrote down a string of numbers and letters, a shipment of high-end electronics moving through the docks that night. It was small, insignificant in the grand scheme of Luca's empire. Just one piece of information. She texted the code to the number on the card Klein had given her. Then she dropped the phone and sank to the linoleum floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She sobbed into her hands, the sound raw and ugly in the empty apartment. She had crossed a line. She was not just a bartender or a paralegal anymore. She was a traitor. The next evening at Perseus, the guilt sat in Eva's stomach like a lead weight. Every time Luca looked at her, she expected him to see it written on her forehead. She was organizing receipts in his office, her hands moving mechanically. Luca was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian. He hung up and swiveled his chair to face her. "You are quiet tonight," he observed. Eva jumped, dropping a stack of receipts. "I am just tired." "It has been a long week." Luca stood up and walked over to her. He moved with a predator's grace, silent and sure. He crouched down to help her pick up the papers. His hand brushed hers, and she flinched as if burned. Luca paused, holding a receipt. He looked up at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "It is not just tired. Eva," he said softly, "you look like you are waiting for the roof to cave in." Eva forced a smile. It felt brittle. "Just family stuff. My brother's bills are piling up again. The collectors are getting aggressive." It was a half-truth, the most dangerous kind of lie. Luca studied her for a moment longer, then stood up. He walked to the safe hidden behind a painting on the wall. Eva watched him, her heart pounding. Was he getting a gun? Did he know? He came back with a thick envelope. He placed it on the desk in front of her. $5,000. He said. Eva stared at the envelope. "Luca, I cannot—" "Take it," he interrupted gently. "Consider it an advance. Or a bonus. I do not care what you call it." He walked around the desk and stood in front of her, leaning against the edge, crossing his arms. He looked powerful, invincible. "Let me worry about this city's monsters." "Eva," he said, his voice low and fierce, "you just focus on breathing." Eva looked at the money, blood money, or salvation, she did not know which, and then up at him. He was trying to protect her from the very wolves she was feeding him to. The irony twisted in her gut like a knife. "Thank you," she whispered, picking up the envelope. Her fingers burned. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic between them shifted, deepening into something that terrified Eva as much as the threats from Klein. The work sessions at the mansion became less about work and more about them. Luca would invite her over to review the quarterly projections, but after an hour, the ledgers would be pushed aside. He would order dinner, Thai, Indian, things she had never tried before, and they would eat in the living room. The formal dining table abandoned, one rainy Tuesday, they ended up on the massive velvet sofa, watching a black and white film from the 50s. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of the screen and the fire in the hearth. Eva sat on one end, Luca on the other. But as the movie played, gravity seemed to pull them together. Eva shifted to get comfortable. Luca stretched his arm along the back of the sofa. By the third act, they were sitting side by side, their thighs pressing together. Eva could feel the heat radiating from him. She felt safe here, in this fortress on the hill. It was the only place the fear of Klein did not suffocate her. Luca's hand dropped from the back of the sofa to rest on the cushion between them. Slowly, deliberately. He moved his fingers until they brushed against hers. Eva stopped breathing. She stared at the screen, unseeing. Luca didn't push. He just let his hand rest there. An offer. Eva slowly uncurled her fingers. She slid her hand towards his, their fingers intertwined, locking together. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. He squeezed her hand and she squeezed back. They didn't look at each other. They just sat there in the flickering dark, holding on as if they were both drowning. The turning point came a week later. Eva was in the office at Perseus, waiting for Luca to return from a meeting with a supplier. When the door opened, she smiled, but it froze on her face. Luca walked in, but he wasn't the composed, immaculate figure she knew. His shirt was torn at the collar, and blood was trickling down the side of his face from a nasty gash above his eyebrow. "Luca!" Eva gasped, knocking her chair over as she stood up. "I'm fine," Luca said, waving a hand. He winced as he walked toward his private bathroom. "Just a misunderstanding." "That is not a misunderstanding. That is a laceration," Eva said, her paralegal instincts kicking in alongside her panic. She followed him into the bathroom. Luca was leaning over the sink, splashing water on his face. The water in the basin turned pink. "Sit down," Eva commanded, pointing to the closed lid of the toilet. Luca looked at her in the mirror. He looked surprised by her tone, but he obeyed. Eva rummaged through the cabinet until she found the first aid kit. She dampened a cloth and stepped between his knees. "Look at me," she said softly. Luca looked up. His eyes were dark, his pupils blown wide. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a stark vulnerability. Eva gently dabbed at the cut. It was deep, but clean. She cleaned the blood from his temple, her touch feather-light. She could feel the heat of his skin, the rapid thrum of his pulse in his neck. "You should have seen the other guy." Luca tried to joke, but his voice was rough. "I do not care about the other guy," Eva murmured, concentrating on applying the butterfly bandage. "I care about you." The words hung in the small, tiled room. Eva froze, realizing what she had said. She finished the bandage and pulled her hands back, but Luca caught her wrists. He didn't pull her closer, he just held her there, her hands suspended between them. He turned his face fully toward her. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin on the inside of her wrist, feeling the frantic rhythm of her heart. "Eva," he said. She looked at him. The mask was gone. There was no crime boss here, just a man who looked at her as if she were the only source of light in a very dark world. He stood up slowly. The small bathroom suddenly felt microscopic. He stepped closer, crowding her space, until their bodies were almost touching. "I have thought about this every day," Luca said, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "Every time you walk into a room, every time you smile at me, I think about kissing you." Eva's breath hitched. She looked at his mouth, then up to his eyes. He didn't move. He waited, giving her the power, giving her the choice to walk away. But Eva didn't want to walk away. For weeks, she had been living in a state of constant terror, squeezed between Klein and her secrets, but right here, right now, the only thing that mattered was him. She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Luca exhaled, a sound of relief and hunger mixed together. He closed the distance. His hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't rough. It was slow, reverent, as if he were memorizing the shape of her mouth. His lips were warm and firm. Eva let out a small sound, a whimper of need that had been building for months. She reached up, gripping the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, shifting from gentle to urgent in a heartbeat. Luca groaned low in his throat. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the strength in his muscles. He walked her backward until her back hit the cool tile wall. He caged her in, his hands planted on the wall on either side of her head, leaning his weight into her without crushing her. His control was palpable. A leash he was holding tight. Eva wound her arms around his neck, burying her fingers in his thick hair. She kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear, all the guilt, all the longing. Luca broke the kiss, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "Are you sure?" he rasped. "Yes," Eva whispered. "Please." He didn't ask twice. He scooped her up, his arm hooking under her knees, and carried her out of the bathroom, through the office, and into the adjoining bedroom he kept for long nights. He set her down on the edge of the bed. They didn't tear at each other's clothes. Not yet. There was a desperate need to just feel, to touch. Luca knelt between her legs, kissing the hollow of her throat, his hands roaming over her hips, her waist. Eva arched into him, her hands exploring the muscles of his shoulders under his dress shirt. He stood up and shrugged off his ruined jacket, letting it fall to the floor. He pulled her to her feet. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice rough, checking in with her even now. Eva didn't answer with words. She reached out and began to undo the buttons of his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly. Luca helped her, his hand steadying hers. When the shirt was gone, Eva traced the lines of his torso, the scars that mapped his violent life, and the fresh bandage on his brow. She leaned in and pressed a kiss to the skin right over his heart. Luca shuddered. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply, backing her toward the bed until they fell onto the mattress together. The world outside, the debts, the agents, the lies ceased to exist. There was only the friction of skin, the sound of ragged breathing, and the overwhelming, terrifying realization that she was in love with him. They moved together in a tangle of limbs and sheets, a frantic, beautiful collision of trust and need. And as the scene faded into the darkness of the room, Eva held on to him as if he were the only solid thing left in the universe. The next morning arrived with a cruel, bright beauty. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, painting stripes of gold across the duvet. Eva woke slowly, her body heavy and warm. For a second, she forgot. She just felt the arm draped over her waist, the steady rhythm of breath against her neck. She turned her head. Luca was asleep, his face relaxed, the harsh lines of stress smoothed away. He looked peaceful. Eva felt a pang of sharp, agonizing guilt twist in her chest. She had sold him out. She had given Klein the shipment ID. And last night she had let him love her. She sat up carefully, trying not to wake him. She grabbed her blouse from the floor and began to button it, her fingers clumsy. A hand settled on her shoulder, warm, heavy. Eva froze. Luca sat up behind her. He didn't say anything at first. He just pressed a kiss to the curve of her shoulder, his stubble grazing her skin. "Stay," he murmured. His voice was thick with sleep. "I have to get to the firm," Eva said, her voice sounding thin and brittle to her own ears. "Quit," Luca said. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "I mean it. Quit the firm. Quit the bar. Be my full-time assistant. Handle my personal estate." He kissed her neck, right below her ear. "You do not have to go back to that life, Eva. I will take care of you." Eva closed her eyes, fighting back tears. It was everything she wanted. Safety, him. She turned in his arms, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "I will think about it," she said softly. Luca smiled, satisfied. He kissed her forehead. "Take your time. I am not going anywhere." Eva finished dressing and left the club, stepping out into the blinding morning light of Harborview. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She knew who it was before she looked. "Good work on the shipment ID," the text read. "We need the safe house locations next, or we visit your mother." Eva stared at the screen, the sunlight feeling cold on her skin. She looked back at the club, where Luca was probably making coffee, thinking about a future for them. She pocketed the phone and walked toward the subway, the weight of her betrayal heavier than ever before. The news hit the Moretti syndicate like a hammer blow to the chest. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came in. Eva was sitting in her usual corner of Luca's office at Perseus, cross-referencing vendor payouts, when the heavy mahogany door swung open. Marco, Luca's second-in-command, walked in with a face like thunder. He didn't look at Eva. He looked straight at Luca, who was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the harbor traffic. "They took the van," Marco said, his voice low and gravelly. Luca turned slowly. His expression didn't change, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "The drop on 4th Street? Gone," Marco confirmed. "They hit it 3 blocks from the exchange point, 2 SUVs, tactical gear. They knew exactly which alley the driver was taking to avoid the traffic cameras. They rammed the back, boxed him in, and took the bags." "How much?" Luca asked. $300,000 in cash." Eva's hand slipped on the keyboard. She caught herself instantly, staring at the spreadsheet in front of her as if it contained the secrets of the universe. But her heart had stopped beating. 4th Street, the alleyway route. That was the route she had given Agent Klein 3 days ago. Luca walked back to his desk and sat down, interlacing his fingers, He was terrifyingly calm. That route was decided 2 hours before the transport. Only a handful of people knew it. It has to be the 18th Street crew, Marco spat, pacing the room. They have been trying to muscle in on the seaport logistics for months. They probably got lucky with a spotter. Lucky, Luca repeated, the word tasting like ash. You do not get lucky with a $300,000 interception. Marco, you get informed. Eva felt the blood drain from her face, pooling in her feet. She felt lightheaded. She wanted to vomit. She had told herself it was just money. Klein had said they just wanted to track the flow, to build a case against the organization, not to hurt anyone. But $300,000 was not just a statistic. In this world, that kind of loss got people killed. Find out who talked, Lucas said, his voice devoid of emotion. Turn the 18th Street crew upside down if you have to, but find my money. As Marco left, Luca rubbed his temples, a rare sign of exhaustion. He looked up and saw Eva staring at him, her face pale. I am sorry, he said, his tone softening instantly as he addressed her. You should not have to hear this part of the business. Eva swallowed the bile rising in her throat. It is a lot of money. Luca, it is just paper, he said, though his eyes were hard. It is the principle. Someone is testing our fences. He didn't know. He was looking right at her, the woman who had sold that route to save her mother's medical care, and he saw only a frightened civilian he wanted to protect. The guilt was a physical thing, a parasite eating her from the inside out. 2 nights later, the parasite grew larger. Eva met Agent Klein in the subterranean parking structure of a derelict shopping mall on the edge of town. The concrete space smelled of urine and old gasoline. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered with a maddening buzz. Klein was leaning against the hood of his sedan, checking his watch. When Eva approached, he didn't smile. You are late, he said. I had to wait until Luca was in a meeting, Eva said, her voice echoing in the empty garage. She pulled a small black flash drive from her pocket. Here. It is the payroll structure for the construction firms. Klein took the drive, turning it over in his fingers. Good. And the safe houses? I do not have access to that. Eva lied. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the damp air. I only see the finances. I do not see the real estate deeds. Klein stepped closer. He was a large man, and he used his size like a weapon, crowding her until she had to step back. Do not play games with me. Eva, we know Moretti is moving product to a secure location in the Heights next week. We need the address. I cannot get it, Eva pleaded. If I ask too many questions, he will get suspicious. He's already looking for a leak because of the cash drop. Klein's expression didn't shift. That cash drop was a necessary seizure. We have to keep up appearances. If we let him keep all his money, he gets too powerful. We are managing the ecosystem. You stole his money, Eva said, anger flaring through her fear. You are not building a case. You are robbing him. Klein's hand shot out, grabbing her upper arm. His grip was bruising. Listen to me, he hissed, his face inches from hers. You are not a lawyer anymore. You are an informant. You do what I say. Or maybe your brother has an accident at his next physical therapy session. It would be a shame if he fell down those stairs at the clinic. He's already fragile, isn't he? Eva gasped, trying to pull away, but he held her fast. Don't you dare touch him, she snarled. A mother lioness defending her cub. Then get me the address, Klein said, releasing her with a shove. You have 48 hours. Eva stumbled back, rubbing her arm where his fingers had dug in. She watched him get into his car and drive away, leaving her alone in the dark, sobbing dry, silent tears that burned her eyes. The dichotomy of her life was tearing her apart. The following evening, Luca picked her up from her apartment. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was wearing a soft cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked handsome, approachable, and completely unlike the man who had ordered a manhunt for the 18th Street crew. I am taking you to dinner, he announced. I am not really hungry, Eva said, her stomach still churning from the meeting with Klein. You need to eat, Luca said gently. You are getting thin. Eva, I can see it. He drove them not to a 5-star restaurant, but to a small, unassuming Italian place tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The sign above the door read Da Matteo. When they walked in, the place was empty. The tables were set. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce was rich in the air, but there were no other customers. An older man came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on an apron. He saw Luca and beamed, embracing him like a son. They sat at a corner table lit by a single candle. There were no bodyguards looming in the shadows. It was just them. "Why is it empty?" Ava asked, breaking a piece of crusty bread she knew she wouldn't eat. "I bought the place a few years ago," Luca said, pouring her a glass of red wine. Matteo was going to lose it to a bank. "I cleared the debt and told him to keep cooking. Sometimes, when I need quiet, he closes for the night." He looked around the rustic room with a wistful expression. "My father used to bring me here, before the business got complicated. He always said that the only thing better than power was peace." Ava watched him over the rim of her glass. He rarely spoke of his father. He wanted to get out. Luca continued, his voice low. He had a dream of legitimate business. Construction, imports, no guns, no bribes, just honest work. He wanted to buy a house by the lake and just fish. "What happened?" Ava asked softly. "The life happened," Luca said. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Once you are in, the exit doors are heavy. They are hard to open." He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb stroked her knuckles. "But lately," he said, his gaze intense, "I have been thinking about that lake house. I have been thinking that maybe the doors are not locked. Maybe they just need the right person to help push them open." Eva's breath hitched. He was talking about a future with her, a clean future. And she was the one actively destroying it. "With you, Eva, I feel like I can breathe," Luca confessed. "The noise stops. The paranoia stops. I start imagining something softer than the world I was born into." Eva felt tears prick her eyes. She looked down at their joined hands, his large, capable hand covering hers. She felt like Judas. She felt like a monster. "Luca, She started, her voice trembling. "Shh," he soothed, squeezing her hand. "You do not have to say anything. Just eat." After dinner, they walked to a nearby park. It was late, and the city was asleep. The streetlights cast long, stretching shadows across the grass. The air was cold, a precursor to winter, but Eva felt feverish. They walked in silence until they reached an old stone archway covered in dormant ivy. It was a secluded spot, hidden from the street. Luca stopped and turned to her. He didn't let go of her hand. "I know things have been tense," he said. "The money? The investigation? I know I have been distant. You have been busy," Eva said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never want to be too busy for you," Luca said. He stepped closer, invading her personal space in the way that always made her heart race. He reached up and cupped her face, his hands warm against her cold cheeks. "You are the only person I trust completely, Eva," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers, "in a city of liars. You are the only truth I have." The words were a physical blow. Eva's stomach twisted violently with shame. He trusted her completely, and she was feeding his secrets to the wolves to save her own skin. She couldn't stand it. The guilt was too much. She needed to drown it out. She needed to feel something other than self-loathing. She surged up, kissing him with a desperate, frantic urgency. Luca was surprised for a fraction of a second, but then he groaned, a low sound of surrender, and kissed her back. Eva's hands fisted in his wool coat, pulling him closer, as if she could merge her body with his and hide inside him. The kiss was not gentle. It was heated, messy, fueled by her panic and his pent-up desire. Luca pressed her back gently until her shoulders hit the cold stone of the archway. He didn't pin her. He anchored her. One of his hands moved to the back of her head, tangling in her hair, cradling her skull. The other hand swept down to her hip, gripping her firmly, pulling her body flush against his. "Eva," he murmured against her mouth, his restraint visibly fraying. "Eva, wait." But she didn't want to wait. She kissed his jaw, his neck. her hands frantic on his chest. She wanted him to make her forget. Luca pulled back slightly, breathing hard. He framed her face again, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were dark, dilated, searching hers. He sensed the trembling in her limbs. He sensed the desperation. "Is this fear?" he asked, his voice rough. "Tell me if you are afraid." Eva shook her head violently. "No, not of you, never of you. It was the truth." She was afraid of everything else. Luca searched her face for another second, making sure. Then he nodded. He pulled her back to him, and this time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was deep, consuming. His hand slid under her jacket, his palm burning through her blouse, tracing the curve of her waist. They stood hidden in the shadows of the archway, breaths mingling, bodies aligning in a rhythm that was ancient and instinctive. They stopped just short of losing control completely. It was the sound of a distant siren that broke the spell. Luca pulled back, his chest heaving, his forehead resting against hers again. He closed his eyes, centering himself. "We should go," he rasped, his voice 2 octaves lower than usual. "Before I do something that requires a bed." Eva nodded, unable to speak, her lips swollen and her heart shattering. 2 days later, the trap was sprung. Eva had not given Klein the safe house location. She couldn't do it, but she had given him something else, a meeting time. She knew Luca was meeting a mid-level lieutenant from the Navarro cartel to discuss a truce regarding the territory lines. It was supposed to be neutral ground, a warehouse in the industrial district. Klein had promised they would just surveil the meeting. He promised they just wanted photos of the Navarro lieutenant. Eva was waiting in the library of Luca's mansion, pacing the floor. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. It was 11 at night. The meeting was supposed to be over by now. Her phone didn't ring. At midnight, the front doors burst open. Eva ran into the foyer. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. Luca was leaning heavily on Marco. His white shirt was soaked in crimson on the left side. His face was gray with pain. "Get the doctor!" Marco shouted to the household staff. "Luca!" Eva cried, running to him. Luca looked up. His eyes were hazy, but he focused on her. "I am okay," he gritted out. "Just a scratch." It was more than a scratch. They got him to the master bedroom. The private concierge doctor arrived within minutes, stitching and cleaning. Eva stood in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. It was an ambush. Marco was telling the security chief in the hallway. They knew we were there. They were waiting in the rafters. They opened fire before we even got out of the car. They knew. Eva felt like a murderer. She watched the doctor work, watched the blood-stained towels pile up. When the doctor left, declaring that the bullet had passed through the deltoid muscle without hitting bone or artery, Eva was allowed back in. Luca was sitting up in bed, bare-chested, a thick bandage taped over his shoulder. He looked exhausted, but alive. Eva walked to the side of the bed. She reached out, her hand trembling uncontrollably, and touched the uninjured side of his chest. "I am so sorry," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "I am so sorry." Luca looked at her. He saw the tears, the shaking hands. He reached up with his good arm and wiped a tear from her cheek. "Hey," he said softly, "it is not your fault." "It is," she wanted to scream. "It is entirely my fault. I should have protected you." She sobbed instead, the words tumbling out in a confused rush. "I cannot protect you from anything." She grabbed a damp cloth from the basin the doctor had left and began to wipe a smear of dried blood from his collarbone. She needed to do something. She needed to serve him, to fix him, to atone. Her touch was frantic, scrubbing at the skin. "Eva, stop," Luca said gently. She didn't stop. I am sorry." Luca reached out and grabbed her hand, stopping her. He pulled her down toward him. "Stop," he commanded, but his voice was full of love, not anger. He misread her hysteria completely. He thought she was terrified of losing him. He thought she was traumatized by the violence of his world. "I am not going anywhere," he murmured into her hair as he pulled her into a fierce embrace, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "I am right here. You cannot get rid of me that easily." Eva buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of antiseptic and smoke and him. She clung to him, weeping. Luca held her tight, his hand stroking her back. Then he turned his head and kissed her temple. Then her cheek, then her mouth. The kiss tasted of salt and desperation. Eva kissed him back, needing to feel his life force, needing to prove to herself that he wasn't a ghost. "Be careful with your shoulder," she whispered against his lips. "I do not care about the shoulder," Luca growled. He pulled her onto the bed with him. The tension of the night, the brush with death, and the overwhelming emotion exploded between them. It wasn't like the first time. This was raw. It was a reaffirmation of life. Her fingers dug into the muscles of his back, avoiding the bandage, as he breathed her in like oxygen. They moved together slowly, the shadows of the room wrapping around them, hiding the truth for just a few hours more. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the Moretti organization changed. It hardened. Luca was no longer looking for a leak in the lower ranks. The ambush had been too precise. "It is someone close," he told Ava one morning over breakfast. He was wearing his arm in a sling, his face grim, someone who knew the schedule. Eva gripped her coffee mug. "Who do you think it is?" Luca stared out the window at the gray sky. "I am looking at the lieutenants. Marco, Silas, Dominic. They are the only ones who knew the time of that meeting." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "I am increasing security around you, Ava. If they can get to me, they might try to get to you to leverage me." He was lying to her, not about the security, but about the danger. She could tell he was trying to downplay how close the wolves were circling. Eva went to work that day with a cold resolve settling in her chest like a stone. Luca was hunting his most loyal men. He was going to tear his own organization apart, looking for a traitor, never suspecting that the traitor was sleeping in his bed. And Klein wasn't going to stop. He'd almost killed Luca. He had lied about the surveillance. He wanted a war. Eva sat at her desk in the law firm, ignoring the stack of files. She pulled out a fresh notepad. She couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep feeding Luca to the slaughter. If she stopped, Klein would hurt her brother. If she continued, Luca would die. There was only one other option. She had to turn the tables. She had to find dirt on Klein. She had to find out who he was really working with. Because federal agents didn't usually orchestrate gang hits. Eva picked up her pen. Her hand wasn't shaking anymore. She was going to stop the leaks. Even if she had to walk into the fire to do it, the disaster did not happen in the shadows. It happened on the 5 o'clock news, broadcast in high definition to every living room in Harborview, the Front Street logistics hub, a nondescript warehouse that served as the central lung for the Moretti Syndicate's cash laundering operations, was a smoking ruin. Police tape fluttered in the wind, and the chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Gangland shootout leaves 6 dead." Luca Moretti stood in his office at Perseus, the remote control gripped so tightly in his hand that the plastic creaked. He was not watching the reporter. He was watching the body bags being wheeled out on gurneys. 6 men. He had lost 6 men in under 10 minutes. Marco stood by the door, his face ashen. They knew the shift change. "Boss, they hit us exactly during the 7-minute window when the vault is open for the counting transfer." Luca turned off the television. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "That schedule is not written down," Luca said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "It is not on a server. It is not in an email. It is calculated based on the routing numbers from the shell companies." He turned to look at Marco. "Only 3 people know how to read those routing numbers. You, me, and the bookkeeper." Marco shifted uncomfortably. "Eva, boss, she's a civilian. She faints at the sight of blood. She could not orchestrate a hit like this." "She does not have to pull the trigger to load the gun," Luca said. The words tasted like bile. He walked to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Send Leo up, now." While Luca's world was beginning to fracture, Eva's was dissolving into panic. She sat in the break room of the law firm, staring at her phone. Her hands were trembling so violently she had to set the device on the table to watch the video that had just arrived. It was shaky footage, filmed from inside a car. It showed her brother, Sam. Walking out of his physical therapy clinic, he was leaning on his crutches, laughing at something on his phone. The camera zoomed in on his face, then panned to the street sign, then back to him. A text message followed the video. It was from an unknown number, but Eva knew the voice behind it. He looks like he is recovering well. It would be a shame if he had a setback. Loyalty is a luxury some people cannot afford. Eva, we need the routing for the northern distilleries, tonight. Eva felt like she was going to be sick. The news of the warehouse shooting was already circulating the office. People were dead, people she might have seen at the club, and it was her fault. She had given Klein the financial codes, thinking they would just freeze assets. She had not known that they would send a hit squad. She was not just a mole anymore. She was an accessory to murder. She couldn't do this. She had to get out. She had to get away from Luca before she got him killed, and she had to get away from Klein before he killed her brother. She left work early, pleading a migraine. When she got to her apartment, she didn't pack. She just sat on her couch, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling, trying to figure out how to break the heart of the only man who had ever made her feel safe. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Luca. "We need to talk. I think we should take a step back." She stared at the words. They felt weak, cowardly. Before she could press send, a heavy knock rattled her front door. Eva froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood up, grabbing a kitchen knife from the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice thin. "Open the door. Eva." It was Luca. Eva dropped the knife into the sink and unlocked the deadbolt. When she opened the door, Luca filled the frame. He was wearing a dark overcoat, his face drawn and tired, his eyes dark with a mixture of exhaustion and something else. Desperation. He didn't wait to be invited. He stepped inside, bringing the scent of rain and expensive cologne into her cramped, stale apartment. He looked around. It was the first time he had been to her place since the early days. He took in the stack of unpaid medical bills on the counter, the water stain on the wall, the draft coming from the window she had tried to seal with duct tape. "Luca," Eva started, her voice shaking. "I was just about to text you. I think this is a mistake." Luca turned to look at her. "What is a mistake?" "Us," she said, hugging her arms around herself. "I am a liability. Luca, you have a target on your back, and I am just a paralegal with too much debt. I drag you down. We should stop." Luca looked at her, really looked at her, and the anger she had expected didn't come. Instead, his expression crumbled into something painful. He crossed the small room in 2 strides. Before Eva could back away, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a gentle hug, it was a collision. He buried his face in her neck, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a world that was spinning off its axis. "You are not a liability," he growled into her hair. "Do not ever say that." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands. He looked at the peeling paint, then back at her. "I hate that you live like this," he said, his voice rough. "I hate that you are here, worrying about heating bills while I sleep in an empty mansion. You do not belong here. Eva, you belong with me." "No," Eva sobbed, the guilt crushing her. "You do not understand. I understand that the world is burning down around me," Luca said fiercely. "I lost 6 men today. My operations are bleeding. I do not know who to trust." He pressed his forehead against hers. "But when I think about coming home, I do not think about the house on the hill. I think about you. You are the only piece I have left." Eva let out a broken sound. She wanted to push him away, to scream the truth, to save him from herself, but she couldn't. She was too weak, and she loved him too much. She grabbed the lapels of his coat and pulled him down. They collapsed onto her worn-out beige couch. It was not graceful. Eva ended up straddling his lap, her hands tangling in his hair, kissing him with a feverish intensity that mirrored his own. Luca's hands were everywhere, on her waist, her back, cupping her face. He kissed her as if he were trying to breathe for both of them. "Move in with me." he whispered against her lips. Eva froze. What? Move into the mansion, he said, his eyes searching hers. Tonight, pack a bag. I do not want you here alone. It is not safe, and I do not want to wake up without you anymore. His voice shook on the last words. The great Luca Moretti, the king of Harborview, was begging. Eva looked at him. Seeing the vulnerability he hid from everyone else, she knew she should say no. She knew moving in would only give Klein more leverage, more access. But in that moment, she was selfish. She wanted one more night, one more illusion. Okay, she whispered, pressing her forehead to his so he wouldn't see the fresh tears spilling from her eyes. Okay. While Eva was packing a bag, Leo, the syndicate's chief technician, was sweating through his shirt in Luca's office at the club. He had run the audit 3 times. He had cross-referenced the encryption keys, the cell tower pings, and the data packets. The door opened and Marco walked in. "Where is the boss? He's with the girl," Leo said, wiping his glasses. "Marco, you have to look at this." Marco walked around the desk and looked at the monitors. "I tracked the leak to a burner phone," Leo explained, his voice trembling. "It is using a bouncy encryption, very high-end, likely federal issue. But the user made a mistake. They forgot to turn off the GPS tagging on the metadata for one of the uploads. And?" Marco asked. "And the phone pings perfectly match Eva Carter's movements for the last 6 weeks." Leo said, "Look, here is the ping near the clinic. Here is the ping at her apartment. And here is the ping from inside the mansion the night the shipment codes were stolen." Marco stared at the screen. The red dots formed a damning trail. "Does the boss know?" Marco asked. "Not yet," Leo said. "I wanted to be sure." Marco straightened up. "Print it, all of it." When Luca arrived at the club 2 hours later, he was in a better mood. He had dropped Eva off at the mansion, settling her into the guest wing, for propriety, though he intended to change that soon and had come to check on the investigation. He walked into his office to find Marco and Leo standing in silence. "Did you find the leak?" Luca asked, pouring himself a drink. Leo placed a thick file on the desk. Luca picked it up. He flipped through the pages. He saw the maps, the timestamps, the correlation between the stolen data and Eva's presence. He stopped. The room went silent. "This is wrong," Luca said. He tossed the file back onto the desk. "Run it again, boss." Leo started, his voice squeaking. "I ran it 4 times. The device ID—" "It is wrong," Luca roared, slamming his hand onto the desk. The glass of whiskey jumped, amber liquid splashing onto the wood. "Eva is not a rat," Luca said, breathing hard. "She's a paralegal. She's barely keeping her head above water. She does not have the sophistication to pull this off. Someone is setting her up." Marco stepped forward. "Luca, look at the timing. The warehouse hit happened 3 days after she reviewed the routing files." "Coincidence," Luca snapped. Just then, Luca's phone buzzed. It was a text from one of his captains. They got Tony. "Ambush on the I-95 ramp. He's dead." Tony was one of Luca's oldest drivers. He had been moving the backup servers. Only one person knew where those servers were going today. Eva. She had organized the moving company invoice that morning. Luca stared at the phone. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a statue carved from gray stone. He looked at the file on the desk. He looked at the name Eva Carter, printed at the top of the dossier. "Put a tail on her," Luca said. His voice was unrecognizable. It sounded dead. "But she is at the mansion," Marco said. "If she is the leak, she will need to report to her handler that she is inside." Luca said, "Watch her. If she leaves the grounds, follow her, and bring me the pictures." The confirmation came the next afternoon. Eva told the house staff she needed to go to the pharmacy for her brother. She drove her beat-up sedan to a downtown parking garage. Luca sat in an SUV 2 levels up, watching through a tinted window. Beside him, Marco held a long-range camera. They watched Eva get out of her car. She looked terrified, constantly checking over her shoulder. A gray sedan pulled up. A man got out, Agent Klein. Luca watched as Eva argued with him. She was waving her hands, her face streaked with tears. She looked like she was pleading. But then she reached into her purse. She pulled out a silver USB drive. She handed it to Klein. The shutter of Marco's camera clicked rapidly, capturing the exchange in high definition. Frame by frame, the betrayal frozen in time. Luca didn't say a word. He didn't scream. He didn't break anything. He just watched the woman he loved sell his life to a federal agent. "Let's go," Luca said. "Back to the club?" Marco asked. "No," Luca said. "Back to the house." The end came swiftly. Navarro didn't wait. With the intel on the USB drive, security schematics, shift changes, blind spots, they launched a full-scale assault on the Moretti estate that very evening. The sun had just set when the first explosion rocked the front gates. Luca was in the foyer. He hadn't changed out of his suit. He was standing in the center of the room, holding the printed photographs of the parking garage meeting. Gunfire erupted outside. The sound of glass shattering echoed through the house. The security team was shouting, returning fire, but the enemy was already inside the perimeter. They knew exactly where the guards would be. Eva ran down the grand staircase, wearing one of Luca's shirts she had borrowed. "Luca, what is happening?" She stopped when she saw him. He wasn't looking at the door. He wasn't looking at the armed men storming his lawn. He was looking at her, and the look on his face was more terrifying than any army. "Luca?" she whispered. Luca threw the photos into the air. They fluttered down like dead leaves, landing at her feet. Eva looked down. She saw herself handing the drive to Klein. "Luca," she gasped, looking up. "I can explain." "Explain." Luca's voice was a hoarse rasp. "Explain how you sold me. Explain how you traded my life for—" "What? Money, safety? They have Sam," Eva screamed, the tears finally flowing freely. "Klein has my brother. He threatened to kill him. I didn't have a choice. There is always a choice." Luca roared. "You could have come to me. I would have burned the city down to save your brother, but you chose him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to let my men die." A bullet shattered the window above the door, showering them with glass. A Molotov cocktail followed, smashing against the heavy velvet drapes. The fire caught instantly, climbing the fabric like a living thing. Luca didn't flinch. He walked to the utility closet under the stairs. He came out carrying a red jerry can of gasoline. "Luca." "What are you doing?" Eva cried, backing away. "This house," Luca said, unscrewing the cap. "I bought it thinking I could fill it with a family. I brought you here thinking you were the one good thing I had." He splashed the gasoline across the polished marble floor. The smell of fumes mixed with the smoke from the burning drapes. "It was all a lie," he said, his eyes reflecting the growing flames. He splashed the fuel over the antique table where they had eaten dinner, over the sofa where they had held hands. "Luca, please, we have to get out," Eva begged. Luca struck a match. He held it up. "Everything built on lies deserves to burn," he said. He dropped the match. The foyer erupted, the gasoline ignited with a whoosh of heat and light. A wall of fire separated them from the front door. The mansion was groaning now. The attack outside was intensifying, but the real destruction was happening inside. The fire spread rapidly, eating the oxygen, turning the grand estate into an oven. Eva coughed, the smoke stinging her eyes. She looked for an exit, but the flames were blocking the path to the kitchen. Above them, the main support beam of the balcony groaned. The fire had weakened the structure. Luca stood still, watching the flames, looking like a man ready to die in his own pyre. "Luca!" Eva screamed. The beam cracked. It came down with a thunderous crash, aiming directly for Eva. Luca didn't think. He didn't calculate. He moved. He lunged through the wall of fire, tackling Eva, his momentum carrying them both out of the path of the falling timber. The beam smashed into the floor where she had been standing a second before, sending up a geyser of sparks and debris. Luca dragged her up. His coat was singed, his face smeared with soot. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Move!" he shouted over the roar of the fire. He dragged her through the smoke-filled service hallway, kicking open the side door that led to the gardens. They stumbled out into the cool night air. The house behind them was a torch, flames shooting through the roof, illuminating the night sky. The sounds of the gunfight were fading as the sirens of police cars approached in the distance. Navarro's men were retreating, their job done. Luca released Eva. She fell to her knees in the grass, coughing, her lungs burning. She looked up at him. He was standing over her, silhouetted against the inferno of his life. "Luca," she wheezed, "you saved me." Luca looked down at her. His face was a mask of cold, impenetrable ice. "I saved you because I am not a murderer," he said. He turned to look at the burning mansion. The roof collapsed inward with a sickening crunch. He looked back at her. "Get out of here! Eva, Luca, please. Disappear," he commanded. His voice was dead. "Leave Harborview. Go somewhere I cannot find you, because if I see you again—" He didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. "I will change my mind about letting you live," he finished softly. He turned his back on her and walked toward the arriving sirens, toward the ruin of his empire, leaving her alone in the darkness. The smoke from the mansion fire hung over Harborview for 3 days, a gray smear against the autumn sky that refused to dissipate. The local news channels were in a frenzy, running 24-hour coverage of what they called the Hilltop Inferno. The anchors spun wild, breathless theories about a cartel war spilling over from the border, or an internal power struggle within the city's underworld. They showed aerial footage of the blackened skeleton of the estate, the collapsed roof, and the scorched earth where Luca Moretti's life used to be. They did not know the truth. They did not know that the fire was not an act of war, but a funeral pyre for a trust that had been shattered beyond repair. Luca Moretti watched the coverage from the 35th floor of a building in the financial district. He stood in the center of a penthouse that was the antithesis of his old home. There were no warm woods, no family photographs, no history. It was all chrome, glass, and white leather. It was cold, sterile, and anonymous. It was a fortress, not a home. "Turn it off," Luca said, his voice grating like stone against stone. Marco, standing by the wall with a tablet in hand, muted the television. The silence in the room was absolute. "We have secured the perimeter," Marco reported, his tone strictly professional. "The remaining operations have been moved to the sub-basements of the commercial properties. We are ghosting. Boss, no one knows where we are." "Good," Luca said. He turned away from the window. His face was harder now, the lines around his eyes etched deeper. He looked like a man who had cut away everything soft inside him to make room for pure rage. "Find Navarro. Find the agents. I want to know where they sleep. I want to know where they eat. What about the girl?" Marco asked quietly. Luca flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of the jaw, but Marco saw it. "She is gone." Luca said, "We found her car abandoned in a lot near the interstate." Marco pressed, "If she talks to the feds again—" "She will not," Luca interrupted. He walked to the bar and poured a glass of water, his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of containing the violence boiling under his skin. "She knows what happens if I see her again." Eva Carter was not gone, but she was invisible. She was currently sitting on the edge of a sagging mattress in the Starlight Motor Inn, a dilapidated roadside motel 10 miles outside the city limits. The neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker, casting an intermittent pink glow through the thin curtains. The room smelled of bleach and stale cigarettes. Eva looked at the phone in her hand. It was a cheap burner she had bought with cash at a convenience store. "Is he comfortable?" she asked, her voice tight. "He is settling in." "Miss Carter," the nurse on the other end said, "the facility in Ohio is excellent. Your mother is in the room next door. They are safe here. No one under the name Carter is listed." "Thank you," Eva whispered. She ended the call and broke the SIM card, flushing it down the toilet. It was the 3rd phone she had used in 4 days. She had spent every cent she had. She had sold her car to a scrapyard for a fraction of its value. She had emptied her small savings account. And yesterday, she'd done the hardest thing of all. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pawn shop receipt. It was for a diamond tennis bracelet, the first gift Luca had ever given her. He'd given it to her casually, sliding it across the desk after she had saved him $50,000 in tax liabilities, telling her it was just a bonus. She had pawned it for enough cash to pay for the first 3 months of her brother's care in the new facility. Every time she looked at the receipt, she felt a fresh wave of nausea. She had sold his gift to pay for the safety his enemies had threatened. The cycle of betrayal felt endless. But Eva was not just hiding. She was working. She opened her laptop, the screen glowing blue in the dim room. Spread out on the bedspread were pages of notes, printouts, and a digital recorder. Klein thought he had broken her. He thought she was just a terrified civilian who would run and hide in a hole. He did not realize that a paralegal's greatest weapon was not a gun, but a paper trail. For the last 72 hours, Eva had been hunting. She had used her knowledge of the legal system to access public records. She had cross-referenced the numbers on the shell companies Klein had mentioned. She had started recording every interaction, every threat. She played back a file on her computer. It was a recording of Klein from their last meeting in the garage, captured on her phone in her pocket. "We are managing the ecosystem. If we let him keep all his money, he gets too powerful." She had him. She had proof that Klein was not conducting an investigation, but a shakedown. He was working with Navarro to destabilize Luca and take a cut of the profits. Eva stared at the screen. She was terrified. Her hands shook every time a car door slammed outside, but beneath the fear, there was a cold, hard resolve. She had destroyed Luca's life to save her family. She owed him a debt. If she was going to go down, she was going to take Klein and Navarro with her. The knock on the door came at 2 a.m. It was not a polite knock. It was a single, heavy thud that rattled the door in its frame. Eva jumped. Scrambling off the bed, she grabbed the pepper spray she kept on the nightstand. She didn't ask who it was. She knew. Klein had found her, or Navarro. She backed against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Open it, Eva!" The voice was low, rough, and familiar. Eva stopped breathing. The pepper spray slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. She walked to the door on legs that felt like water. She undid the chain. She turned the lock. She opened the door. Luca stood in the dim, flickering hallway. He was wet from the rain, his black trench coat soaked, water dripping from his dark hair. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face was gaunt, the sharp angles of his cheekbones more pronounced than ever. But his eyes were burning. He pushed his way inside. He didn't hit her. He didn't yell. He simply occupied the space, his presence filling the small, sordid room until there was no air left for her to breathe. He kicked the door shut behind him. "How did you find me?" Eva whispered, backing away until her legs hit the edge of the mattress. "You used your old email to forward a medical record for your brother," Luca said. His voice was devoid of emotion. Flat and dead, a mistake. He walked toward her. Eva scrambled backward, moving around the bed, putting distance between them. "Luca, please," she stammered. "I sent them away. My family is gone. You do not have to hurt them." Luca stopped. He looked at the shabby room, the peeling wallpaper, the laptop open on the bed. He looked at her, wearing the same clothes she had fled the mansion in. Her hair messy, her face pale and drawn. "Do you think I am here to hurt your brother?" he asked quietly. "I do not know what you are here for," Eva said, her voice rising with panic. "You told me to disappear. I am trying. I just needed time to get them safe." "Time," Luca repeated. He laughed, a short, harsh sound that had no humor in it. "You had months. Eva, you had months to tell me. You had months to trust me. Instead, you let me bleed." He moved suddenly, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He cornered her against the wall near the bathroom, trapping her. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Tell me," he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Tell me everything. Who is the handler? How deep does it go?" "It is Agent Klein," Eva cried, pressing her back against the peeling floral wallpaper. "He is corrupt. He is working with Navarro. He threatened to kill Sam. I would have protected Sam," Luca roared, his control finally snapping. He slammed his hand against the wall beside her head. Eva flinched, turning her face away. "You do not understand," she shouted back, finding a sudden, desperate courage in her fear. You do not understand what it is like to have no power. Luca, you have armies. You have millions in cash. I have nothing. I have a sick brother and a mother who cannot remember my name and a pile of bills I cannot pay." She shoved his chest. It was a pathetic, weak shove against his solid frame, but it was fueled by months of terror. When Klein came to me, "I was drowning," she screamed, shoving him again. "I did not want to hurt you. I just wanted them to live." Luca grabbed her wrists. He didn't squeeze. He didn't crush bone. He just held them, stopping her assault, anchoring her hands between their chests. He looked down at her. His chest was heaving. His eyes were wide, the anger warring with a profound, agonizing hurt. "I would have given you everything," he rasped, his voice breaking. "I would have paid every bill. I would have moved the world for you. I could not ask you to buy my loyalty." Eva sobbed, the tears spilling over. "It was not about loyalty," Luca yelled, shaking her hands slightly. "It was about love. I loved you, Eva, and you looked me in the eye every day and lied." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was their ragged breathing and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. They stood inches apart, bound by his grip on her wrists. The anger in the air began to shift, curdling into something raw and painful. Luca stared at her tear-streaked face. He looked at her mouth. His thumbs moved unconsciously, stroking the sensitive skin on the inside of her wrists, feeling the frantic pulse beating there. "I hate you," he whispered, but the words lacked conviction. They sounded like a plea. "I hate you for making me choose between you and everything I built. I hate you for making me burn my home." He leaned in closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "And I still dream about you every night," he confessed, the admission torn from his throat. "I close my eyes and I still see you in my kitchen. I still feel you in my bed. It is driving me insane." Eva looked up at him, her heart breaking all over again. She saw the torture in his eyes. He wanted to kill her, and he wanted to save her, and the conflict was tearing him apart. Overwhelmed, Eva stopped fighting. She leaned in first. "I am sorry." She breathed against his lips. "I am so sorry." She closed the small gap. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was an explosion. Luca made a sound deep in his throat, something between a groan and a snarl. He released her wrists and his hands flew to her face, framing it roughly. He kissed her with a desperate intensity, backing her gently against the wall until there was nowhere left to go. Eva responded with equal force. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down, her fingers tangling in his wet hair. It was a kiss of apology, of longing, of shared grief. It was fierce and aching, a physical manifestation of the storm that had destroyed their lives. Luca's hand slid down to her waist, pulling her body flush against his. He was soaking wet, cold from the rain, but his touch burned. He kissed her jaw, her neck, then came back to her mouth as if he were starving. They nearly lost themselves. For a moment in that dingy motel room, the betrayal didn't exist. There was only the memory of what they had been, and the undeniable reality of how much they still wanted each other. But as Eva arched into him, a car backfired on the highway outside. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. Luca froze. He pulled back. He was breathing hard, his pupils blown wide, his lips swollen. He rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. His hands were still gripping her waist, as if he couldn't bear to let go. "This does not fix it," he rasped. His voice was wrecked. "Wanting you. It does not erase what you did." "I know," Eva whispered, tears leaking from her closed eyes. He stepped back, putting a foot of distance between them. The loss of his warmth was immediate and painful. He ran a hand through his hair, regaining his composure, pulling the mask of the boss back into place. "If we are going to survive this," he said, his voice steadying, "we have to deal with them. Klein, Navarro, they are not going to stop hunting us." Eva wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt. She nodded, sniffing. "I know. That is why I stayed." She walked to the bed and picked up the laptop. She turned it around so he could see the screen. "I have been recording him," she said. "I have emails. I have the bank transfer records where Navarro paid a consulting fee to a firm owned by Klein's wife." Luca looked at the screen. He stepped closer. reading the data. His eyes narrowed. "You did this?" he asked, looking at her with a grudging respect. "I am a paralegal," Eva said, her voice gaining a little strength. "I know how to find a paper trail." Luca studied the evidence. "This is good. It proves the corruption. But it is not enough to stop a war. The FBI will take months to process this. And by then, Navarro will have killed us both. We need to trap them," Eva said. "We need to give them something they cannot resist." Luca looked at her. "What are you thinking?" "They want you dead," Eva said. "And they want your distribution network. Klein keeps asking for the master schedule, the one that controls the entire eastern seaboard shipments. I do not have a master schedule," Luca said. "It is decentralized. They do not know that," Eva countered. "We can create one, a fake master file. We can leak it to Klein. Tell him that you are planning one final, massive shipment to liquidate your assets before you flee the country." Luca's mind was already racing, catching up to her plan. "We bait them. We tell them the shipment is happening at a specific location," Eva said, "a place where they will feel confident enough to show up in person. Klein will want the glory of the bust, Navarro will want the cargo, and we will be waiting." Luca finished. He looked at her. For the first time since the fire, there was no hatred in his eyes. There was wary calculation, and something else, a flicker of partnership. "It is dangerous," he said. "You would have to deliver the intel. You would have to get close to Klein again." "I can do it," Eva said. She looked at him steadily. "I owe you this. Luca, let me fix it." Luca hesitated. He looked at her fragile frame, her tired eyes. He wanted to tell her to run. He wanted to lock her in a tower where she would be safe. But he knew that wasn't an option anymore. "Okay," he said, "we do it. But on one condition." "What?" "My men move your family again," Luca said, "to a secure facility in Canada. Private security, 24/7. Klein will never find them." Eva let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for weeks. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," Luca said sharply. "We are not friends, Eva. We are allies of necessity." He turned to the door. "Pack your things. You cannot stay here. It is not safe." "Where are we going?" Eva asked, closing her laptop. "To a safe house," Luca said. "We have work to do." The next 2 weeks were a blur of tension and strategy. They moved between safe houses, abandoned apartments, basement suites, places that didn't exist on any map. The city of Harborview became a chessboard, and they were the kings in hiding. The streets were becoming a war zone. Navarro's men were emboldened, striking at Luca's remaining territories. Every night there were reports of fires, beatings, skirmishes. In the safe houses, the air between Eva and Luca was thick enough to choke on. They worked over maps spread out on cheap kitchen tables. They drafted the fake documents for the bait shipment. They scripted the calls Eva would make to Klein. They tried to keep it professional, but the space was too small, and the history was too loud. One evening, in a safe house near the docks, they were looking at a blueprint of an abandoned freight yard. Eva reached for a marker to circle an entry point. Her hand brushed Luca's where it rested on the table. The contact was electric. Eva froze. Luca went still. For a moment, neither of them moved. They stared at the map, but their entire awareness was focused on that square inch of skin where they touched. Eva looked up. Luca was watching her. His gaze was dark, heavy with memory. He looked at her mouth, then back to her eyes. He leaned in, just an inch. Eva felt her heart hammering. She wanted him to bridge the gap. She wanted him to forget the betrayal and just be the man who had held her in the rain. But then Luca blinked. The wall came back up. He pulled his hand away as if she had burned him. "Focus on the exit strategy," he said, his voice tight. Eva swallowed the lump in her throat. "Right, the exit strategy." She went back to drawing the circle, her hand trembling. They were building a trap for their enemies, but every day they spent together felt like they were building a trap for themselves. One made of longing and regret, with no way out. The abandoned freight yard on the outskirts of Harborview was a graveyard of industry. Rusted shipping containers were stacked like rotting teeth against the gray sky, and the wind howled through the gaps. carrying the scent of salt and decay. It was the kind of place where things went to die, or where they were buried. Eva stood in the center of the main clearing, her coat wrapped tight against the chill. She felt small, exposed, and terrified. Under her coat, taped to her chest, was a wire. 100 yards away, hidden inside a hollowed-out red container. Luca Moretti adjusted his earpiece. He could hear Eva's breathing. It was rapid, shallow, the sound of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. He gripped his handgun, his knuckles white. "Hold the line," he whispered to Marco, who was crouched beside him with a rifle. "Wait for the admission." A convoy of black SUVs crunched over the gravel, kicking up dust. They fanned out in a semicircle around Eva, their headlights cutting through the gloom. Agent Klein stepped out of the lead vehicle, and he looked smug, adjusting his tie as if he were walking into a boardroom rather than a criminal exchange. Flanking him was a man with a scar running down his jaw, Navarro's lieutenant. "You brought the schedule?" Klein asked, his voice echoing in the vast, empty yard. Eva held up a thick manila envelope. Her hand was trembling, but she forced her voice to be steady. "It is all here. The master shipping manifest, the consolidation accounts, everything you need to take over the eastern seaboard." Klein smiled. It was a cold, reptilian expression. "Bring it here." Eva took a step forward, then stopped. "Where is the guarantee? You said if I gave you this, my family would be safe. You said I could walk away." Klein laughed. He looked at the lieutenant. "Hear that? She thinks she gets to walk away." He turned back to Eva, shaking his head with mock pity. "Eva, you are a loose end. You are a liability. Did you really think we would let a paralegal who knows federal secrets just retire to the suburbs?" Luca, listening in the dark, felt a surge of rage so potent it nearly blinded him. "I did everything you asked," Eva said, her voice rising. "You threatened my brother. You threatened to kill him in his hospital bed. I sold out the man I loved because of you. And that makes you a traitor to everyone," Klein said dismissively. "If things go bad here, Eva, the official report will say you were the mastermind, a disgruntled employee who played both sides. I will pin everybody, every stolen dollar, and every burnt mansion on you." Luca's grip on his weapon tightened. There it was, the truth, the confirmation that she had been a victim, not a villain. Navarro's lieutenant grew impatient. "Cut the chatter, check the package." Two of Navarro's soldiers grabbed the crate Eva had been standing next to, the supposed final cash shipment Luca was liquidating. They pried the lid open with crowbars. They froze. "It is paper," one of them shouted. "It is just shredded newspaper," the lieutenant spun around, pulling his weapon. "It is a setup." Panic exploded in the yard. "Grab the girl!" Klein screamed, pointing at Eva. "She is leverage, now!" Luca roared into his radio. The freight yard erupted. Luca kicked open the doors of the container. His men, positioned on the tops of the rusty stacks and inside the hollow shells of the yard, opened fire. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of cracking thunder that drowned out the wind. Bullets sparked off the metal containers, sending showers of orange light into the dim evening. Eva screamed, ducking as glass shattered in the SUV behind her. She scrambled away from Klein, running toward the open space of the yard, desperate to find cover. "Get her!" Klein yelled, firing blindly toward the muzzle flashes in the distance. Eva found herself pinned. Behind her, Klein and the Navarro soldiers were advancing, in front of her. Luca's men were laying down a suppression wall of lead. She was caught in the crossfire of the two men who had destroyed her life. She saw Luca running toward her, weaving between the stacks, his coat flying behind him like a dark banner. He was coming for her. Again. Something inside Eva snapped. She was done running. She was done being the victim. She stopped moving. She stood up, right in the center of the kill box. She reached into her coat and ripped the recorder off her chest. She held it up high. "Stop!" she screamed. Her voice was shrill, desperate, and loud enough to carry over the gunfire. She pressed play. She held the device up to the portable speaker she had rigged on her belt, a desperate, amateurish plan B she had concocted in the motel room. Klein's voice boomed across the yard, distorted but undeniable. "You are not a lawyer anymore. You are an informant. You do what I say. Or maybe your brother has an accident at his next physical therapy session." The shooting faltered. The Navarro soldiers hesitated. Looking at Klein, they were mercenaries, not ideologues. They didn't know they were working with a Fed who was threatening crippled boys. "I will pin everybody, every stolen dollar, and every burnt mansion on you," the recording echoed off the metal walls. "You lied to us," the lieutenant snarled, turning his gun slightly toward Klein. "You said she was the rat. You said this was a clean cleanup." Klein's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. He realized his narrative was crumbling. He realized he was going to prison, or to a grave. He looked at Eva. She was the source of his ruin. "I will kill you," Klein screamed. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Eva's chest. Eva didn't move. She didn't flinch. She stared him down, accepting the cost of the truth. But Luca Moretti was faster. "No!" Luca shouted. He didn't fire. He didn't have a clear shot past the obstacles. Instead, he threw himself forward, launching his body into the open space just as Klein pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the air, sharp and final. Luca slammed into Eva, tackling her sideways. They hit the gravel hard, rolling behind the cover of a rusted forklift. Luca grunted, a sharp, wet sound. Eva scrambled up, her hands frantic. "Luca!" He was lying on his back, breathing hard. A dark stain was spreading rapidly on the white shirt under his coat, just above his hip. "I am fine," he wheezed, grimacing. "Stay down. Out in the yard." The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. Marco had taken the shot. Klein was on the ground, clutching his leg, screaming. The Navarro lieutenant, realizing the game was rigged, had thrown down his weapon, surrendering to Luca's superior numbers. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The Harborview police, the FBI, the world was coming for them. Luca looked at Eva. He reached up, his hand bloody, and touched her face. "You are crazy," he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Standing up in a firefight?" "I learned from the best," Eva said, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her hands against his wound to staunch the bleeding. Luca looked past her, at the flashing lights reflecting off the clouds. "It is over," he said softly. He wasn't talking about the fight. He was talking about the life. The next few hours were a blur of chaotic legal maneuvering. Luca did not run. He let the paramedics take him. He let the agents handcuff him to the gurney. But before they put him in the ambulance, he spoke to his lawyer, a man who had been waiting in the shadows for this exact moment. "Give them everything," Luca said, his voice weak but commanding. The deal was unprecedented. Luca Moretti, the king of Harborview, offered the Department of Justice a trade. He gave them Navarro. He gave them Klein and the corruption ring within the agency. And he gave them the keys to his own kingdom. He surrendered his distribution networks, his shell companies, and his contacts. He effectively burned down the rest of his empire, brick by brick, account by account. In exchange, he demanded two things: leniency for his own sentencing, a reduced term served under house arrest and asset forfeiture, and total, absolute immunity and protection for Eva Carter and her family. He traded his power for her freedom. 3 days later, the hospital room was quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor and the hum of the ventilation system. Luca was sitting up in bed, his torso wrapped in thick bandages. He looked different. The edge was gone. The dangerous aura that usually surrounded him had softened into a weary humanity. Eva sat in the plastic chair beside the bed. She had not left the hospital since he was admitted. "You did not have to do it," she said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched for an hour. "You gave it all away. The money, the territory. I did not need it," Luca said, looking at her. He reached out his hand. Eva took it. His skin was warm. "I was angry. Eva," he admitted, his voice rough, "when I burned the house, I wanted to hurt you. I wanted to destroy the memory of us because I thought it was a lie." "I know," Eva whispered, looking down at their joined hands. "But even then," Luca said, squeezing her fingers, "when the beam fell, I did not think about the betrayal. I did not think about the business. My body moved before my brain did. He looked at her intensely. I only wanted to save you. It was the only thing that mattered. The rest of it, the empire, the reputation, and it was just noise. Eva felt a tear slide down her cheek. She stood up. She climbed carefully onto the edge of the hospital bed, mindful of his injuries. The mattress dipped under her weight. She sat close to him, her hip pressing against his unharmed side. She reached up and cupped his face. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes, letting out a long, shuddering breath. "We are a mess," Eva whispered. "We are survivors," Luca corrected. He opened his eyes. They were dark, clear, and full of a love that had walked through fire and come out the other side scarred but alive. Eva leaned down. The kiss was not like the one in the motel room. It wasn't desperate or angry. It was slow. It was unhurried. It was a conversation without words. It tasted of apology, of relief, of a promise made in the ashes of their old lives. Luca's hand slid to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. Eva's hand rested on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating, steady, strong, and real. They kissed until the world outside the hospital room faded away, until there was no mob, no feds, no debts, just a man and a woman who had saved each other. 6 weeks later, the autumn leaves were turning gold and crimson on the streets of Harborview. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and coming winter. Eva and Luca walked down the sidewalk of a modest neighborhood on the north side of the city. It was a quiet street, lined with small brick houses and family-owned shops. Children were playing hopscotch on the pavement. An old woman was sweeping her stoop. There were no black SUVs following them. There were no bodyguards with earpieces. Luca walked with a slight limp, a lingering reminder of the bullet, but he stood tall. He was wearing a simple jacket and jeans. He looked like any other man coming home from work. He held Eva's hand. He didn't grip it like he was afraid she would vanish. He held it easily, comfortably. I spoke to the realtor about the space on Fifth Avenue. Luca said, "It is small, but the kitchen is good." "A restaurant?" Eva asked, glancing up at him. "Da Matteo needs competition," Luca joked, though his smile was genuine. "And I have some recipes my mother taught me. Honest work. Cash registers that actually match the receipts." Eva smiled. It sounded boring. It sounded wonderful. They stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change. Eva looked at him. She saw the scars on his face, the gray hairs that had appeared in the last few months. She thought about the ghosts they carried. She thought about the nightmares that still woke them up sometimes, the smell of smoke, the sound of gunfire. They had lost everything to find this moment. The mansion was ash. The money was gone. Her brother was safe in Canada. Starting over, was it enough? Could they really just be normal people after everything they had done? Luca sensed her hesitation. He turned to her, his dark eyes reading her thoughts as easily as he used to read a ledger. He didn't offer her false promises. He didn't tell her it would be easy. He just squeezed her hand. "We take it one day at a time, Eva," he said softly. Eva looked at the green light. She looked at the open road ahead of them. She squeezed his hand back. "One day at a time," she agreed. They stepped off the curb together, walking away from the shadows of the skyline, walking toward a future that was unwritten, fragile, and entirely their own. Thank you so much for listening to the story. The Mafia boss burned his mansion to ashes after discovering she sold his secrets to survive. I hope you enjoyed this journey of betrayal, redemption, and love. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want to hear more emotional, realistic tales like this one, make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit that notification bell. Share your thoughts on Eva and Luca's ending in the comments. Until next time.